Hey, John here. Let's look at a push that I just did recently out to the Retro BIOS for the the Z80 Retro board. If you take a look at the dev branch where I'm preparing a new release, the most recent commit message is this, which states if it is valid, use the current drive after a warm boot, else fall back to drive A. As you may recall, until we added support for multiple drives, the only drive that existed was drive A. So it made no difference that I simply would always end up resetting the disk to drive A after a warm boot. But today, with multiple disks, it's a little annoying if you're on drive B and you hit Control C and or run a program from drive B and the program terminates, that you end up back on drive A. So let's look at the code that I pushed up to solve this problem. Here's part of the diffs here. Let's get on a terminal window where this will be a little bit more easy to read. Let's look and see what I did here in this last commit. The whole point is try to retain the drive letter that you were running off of if the system ever does a warm boot. Because if you don't, it's actually really annoying. It's been annoying to me and others that I've seen comment on it. Now that we have multiple disks, it'd be nice if you hit Control C or you run a program and the program stops running, you get back to whatever drive you were on before. So let's see here. Get diff -r, the previous version that you saw me copy out of the log on the Retro ASM. This should be pretty simple. Today will be a quickie. This is the whole thing right here. Now this is actually kind of difficult to read, this particular diff, because the old code, this was actually commented out. So the old code was essentially put 0 into the C register because until this new release, we only had one drive anyway. So no matter what, you'd always just come back and drive A. And nobody noticed, nobody said a thing for a year. However, as soon as we have more than one drive and you're on drive C and you're doing some work, and every time you run a command or something, again, that does a warm boot, if the command does a warm boot, it ends up back on drive A, and you lose your user number. It gets a little disorienting. So, yeah, let's fix that. Now, this is not perfect, and this up here was my original idea on how to go about this. What I was going to do originally is go into where CPM keeps the current drive and load it into the accumulator, shut off the most significant 4 bits, and we'll see why in a minute. What that does is it changes the user number to 0, but keeps the drive letter the same. Then it would fall down and put it in the C register and then go on its merry way back to CPM, and all would sort of be okay. But not really, because this would annoyingly leave you with like the wrong user ID. You would always change it to 0 if you wanted that to be retained. And it would also kind of not work well if the drive, let's say you have your BIOS only supports, say, 4 drives or something like that. And somebody goes, oh, I want to select drive, M, which is way beyond 4. What would happen is the BIOS would go, okay, fine, and it would call the disk select routine in the BIOS, and it would do its normal thing, and it would check and find out, oh, that's a bad drive. It would turn an error. The BIOS would then say, oh, there's a select error. Press Control C to reboot, and it would do a warm boot. Come back through here, it would do this again. It would still be wrong. It would say, oh, there's a disk error. And you'd be stuck like this forever until you run over and what I call front button the board, hard boot it or power cycle it. It gets stuck in that loop. That's why I commented this out, okay? Because I did that originally, and I said, well, who cares, since we only have drive A anyway. This was a great way to get through the year without actually addressing this problem. The other day I sat down and I worked this out, and I said, well, this should work, but it's not without certain charms either. Let's take a little closer look at this and see what happens here. Now, what we're left with is essentially what the alteration guide recommends you do. Now, what you do is you pre-initialize the C register with 0, which says, if this thing screws up down here, let's just forcibly go back to drive A, like we did before. Okay, so if we can't do what we want to do, go to drive A, because there's always has to be at least a drive A. Okay? Then what do? We go and get the value in memory at address 4. That's where the CPM BDOS keeps the current disk number, okay? And in that byte, there's 2 nibbles, right? The most significant hex digit, the hit, some people might call that, or we could call it the upper nibble, whatever word you like to use. The most significant 4 bits holds the user number, okay? Which, for me, I always just use user 0. I find all the user number stuff confusing and generally avoid it. But that's what's stored in this left half of this byte. The right half holds the drive number. So what we want to do is isolate just the drive number. So we take the accumulator and load it with the combination of the user number and the drive number. You do this AND, which says set the user number to 0 because I don't want those bits on. We do a compare to the variable that I discussed at some length before that holds the number of total drives in the system. And then we ask, when we did this comparison, which it basically calculates the value of the accumulator minus this, it sets the flags accordingly. Well, if this number here is bigger than the accumulator, I would have had a negative number, and if I had a negative number, the carry flag would be set, okay? And that would be fine. If the carry flag is not set, then that means that the value that's in the memory is too big, and it's bad, okay? And you do not want to leave that in the C register. We do not want to tell the BDOS to reload that because you get in that stupid endless loop of, oh, the drive is bad. Let me reboot. Oh, the drive is bad. Very annoying, okay? So what we do is we ask, is it okay? And if the answer is no, we immediately jump to where the CPM BDOS starts, okay? And at this point, we observe that the C register is still set to 0 because we initialized it that way. And therefore, if we make this jump, we're just saying, someone's a dingus, just use drive A, okay? Otherwise, you will be upset. Okay, if all is well, what we do is we go out and get the whole value from address 4 again, the drive and the user number. We put the combination into the C register, and then we fall down. Let's look at the retro file, because this is just a diff. It'd be easier to see the rest of the code. But this is basically the whole thing here, right? So here's the good old BIOS. Where is that code? It's down here in the... I think I just walked right past it. It's up here somewhere. It's right there. Okay. So what happens at the very end of the warm boot logic is what we just saw it doing here. And this is conditional assembly. I talked about this before. So if you set this to 1, it'll assemble this code. If you make it 0, it'll do this. And this is this is how it used to work. It just always set C to 0 and went to CPM base. Now, when this is 1, try the new method. Put 0 in as the default. If it's bad, go down and just go with C equals 0 as if we always did this using drive A. And if it's not bad, go ahead and say continue using whatever drive was selected before the warm boot. Fall down here and go to the CPM base. Now let's look and see how this thing runs. Because it's still not perfect, and I don't think it can be perfect due to the way the user numbers work, and obviously the BDOS is just not quite wonderful. So let's do a full-on cold boot here. Latest, greatest code. And we can do a directory. Okay, we can go drive B, and we can go directory. And this is configured for 8 drives right now. So what does that mean? I got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. All those should be valid. And I should be able to do a directory. There's no files on the H drive. I can save a file. I can save 100 pages into blah dot, XXX, and it should do that. And I should, I should wait for it to finish doing that. Then I do a directory, and I can see that it's there. However, if I go to drive I, my code, because I only have 8 drives, will have this DPH vecdum set, and this should fail because this is, the drive, the 9th one. So this BDOS error is because I chose a drive letter and I called the disk set routine, which we don't need to look at. I've gone over that before. And now what's going to happen is the BDOS tells me there's an error. All right. And if I hit enter or I hit control C or I do anything at all, it's going to warm boot. So once I hit the enter key here, this machine will warm boot and leave me in drive A, because when it warm booted, it came in here, it found out that I is too big, so it failed, and it set C to 0, and it went back to CPM base this way, okay? On the other hand, if I go back to drive H again, and I say, hello, look, my blah file's still there, and I hit control C to warm boot this, I'll come back to drive H, and I'm still on user number 0, okay? And that's because H is less than this, or equal, in fact, and there's no carry when the subtraction is done. Therefore, it falls down here and keeps things going. So far, so good. Now, this, I'm going to leave it this way because it's okay. All right, this works fine, even if I do like a drive P. Oh, I don't know about that one. Why? Because it went into the BDOS, or rather the BIOS. The BDOS called the BIOS, and the BIOS said no. So I'm going to hit enter now. It'll reboot, leave me in drive A. I type directory. I must be in user 0, because if I was in user 5, I wouldn't see any files right now. And this is the key. Let's go back to user 0. All's well, right? So far, so good. What if I'm a complete dingus and I go to drive X? Well, the letter X is much bigger than the 16th letter of the alphabet. So I've gone beyond the total number of even possible legal drives. Okay? Now, when you do this, I haven't looked at the code, but the BDOS is not very smart about this. Let's watch what happens now if I warm boot this. I'm going to hit Control C this time, and we'll see what happens. I wake up in drive H. How did I get there? Okay? and what the heck is going on? If I go to drive A now and I do a directory, what do I got? What the hell's going on here? User 0, dear. Okay? This is very interesting. So what happened here, it turns out if you do the binary math in your head, drive X is beyond the 16th drive. So if you go beyond the 16th letter and then you keep going, it'll probably go back to drive A. But think about it in binary, right? Because the drive letter has to fit in these 4 bits. If you put a number in there that's 16 or greater, because it'll go 0 to 15 for the drives, right? So once you get a 16, what happens is in hex it's a 1, 0. So if you go to that drive letter, I suspect the BDOS annoyingly puts it in the low memory and potentially clobbers the user number by making it a 1, because you put a number in there that has bits over here that are on. Then, 16 has all zeros over here. So in theory, you should end up on drive A, user 1, if you select what? Drive Q, Man, oh, that's I think I was on a Unix system for a minute there. Let's get out of here and do a man ASCII. All right, if we go like this in hex, what do we got here? It would be Q. Q would be an invalid drive because it would be like the 17th drive. So this, of course, is going to be an error, but what's it going to do? Am I in user 0? No, I'm in user 1 or some other user, right? So if I go back to user 0, I'm okay. I guess if I go to R, maybe I'll end up in drive B as user 1. I mean, this is like really screwy. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. This is great. So I'm going to blame CPM for this part of the problem. And I will also observe that it is not possible for me to take care of it. Base. There's like a CPM base label on the code where we're playing around with, right? Oh, where was it? Right here. It's not possible when you're in this part of the code to understand how and why the invalid drive was selected in the first place and how it got screwed up. So this is kind of a problem that cannot be fixed here at all. Okay, I've done some analysis. I do believe that when you do drive, X, Y, or Z or something like that, it does actually go in and call the disk selection routine, and that says no. And the BDOS does its thing and so on, and it does the warm boot, and it gets all screwed up. But it's screwed up not because the disk selection routine fails, and it's not wrong because this is wrong. It's wrong because the BDOS decided to store the drive number into the memory and address 4. We talked all about that when we talked about formatting the low core and writing the warm boot routine in the first place. It got stored in there outside of the control of the BIOS, okay? So this is something I'm not going to fix. It's just broken. And the solution is not too bad. You saw me playing around trying to reason out what's going on here. The bottom line is don't select drives greater than P, okay? And you'll be fine. As long as you select something that is, drives, 1 through 16, A through P, like O, what happens is this will be fine because it doesn't accidentally set the user most significant bits, right? So if you're on a perfectly legal drive and whatever we had, B had some files on it, right? Oops, I typed too quick. And you then go to a bad drive like O, and it says, I don't want to deal with that. You're going to end up on drive A because you selected an invalid one, and the user ID will be correct, and it'll all work fine, provided you don't go to QRSTUV. All right? If you've got any other ideas on how to do this without, hacking CPM, this lowercase letter here is wrong. There's a hack we could do where we show the user number in the prompt along with the drive letter at the same time. I don't pull requests welcome. That's a common thing to do. I've never done it. This is actually obvious inside the BDOS. I did track that one down. If you're interested, collaborate with us on the Discord, and we'll make a decision on how to actually go forward, whether everybody wants that or not. I think it's kind of a certain amount of screwy charm having the lowercase instead of the uppercase in there. But that is, whatever. It's a little off. And all this comes to mind in the same context of what the heck are you supposed to do when the guy selects drive X? If they are so invalid that even the BDOS can't deal with it, how do other CPMs deal with that? I've never had to do it. I suspect it's always been broken since day one, but it never dawned on me to try and select an invalid drive. I do not recall seeing this in my entire life, and I spent, like I said, certainly like 1980 through 1980, 7 years I had my CPM was my daily driver until I got out of grad school and college in 1987. And that I lived on this thing, and I do not remember this weirdness at all. But like I said, probably because I don't try and select drive Q on my system. Just never did it before. Anyhow, I'm going to pushing this mod out. This will be part of the revision 2 release of the CPM BIOS for the Retro board. Thanks for watching. See you next time.